On 5 News, setbacks in the search for missing toddler Ben Needham. British police officers looking for him in Greece are forced to delay their search as Ben's sister talks movingly about the brother she never met.
We're a family that's lived in hope. And what do you do when that hope's all gone?
Also, Rosetta goes out with a bang. Europe's most successful space project comes to an end as the probe crashes into a comet. Policing your plate, how the government is cracking down on the size of your dinner. And why, if you grew up watching this, you'll be twice as rich as someone who grew up watching this.
I think the cost of living is so much more expensive.
I can't think of too many others at my age that have owned property.
Hello, welcome to 5 News. I'm Matt Barbett. The family of missing toddler Ben Needham have been dealt a blow after officers digging for clues in Kos were forced to stop. A team of specialists from Britain have been scouring sites near to where Ben was last seen back in 1991. But a dispute has broken out after they uncovered 1,500-year-old graves. Now, in an emotional interview, Ben's sister has spoken of her family's anguish about the latest investigation and how she desperately hopes that Ben is found for the sake of their mum. Layla Hayes reports.
The search of this farmland had given Ben Needham's family hope. But this morning, digging was temporarily halted after the owner asked police to stop the search because ancient ruins had been uncovered. Further agony for the family of Ben Needham, who went missing on the Greek island of Kos 25 years ago. Ben's sister Leanna says they desperately want answers, but are afraid of what might be revealed.
I don't know what I'd prefer. I think we're all in the same boat. None of us want to believe that we're going to find something there, because that's 25 years of fighting and pain and hurt that could have been ended 25 years ago. We're a family that's lived in hope. And what do you do when that hope's all gone?
Over the years, Ben's mother, Kerry, has made numerous appeals. And this month she returned to Kos once again. Leanna has also appeared alongside her mother on Greek television. She says she would have done anything to find Ben.
If my face was going to jog somebody's memory, then I'd have plastered my face all over the world, on every newspaper, on everything, to bring him home for my mum. Because I know that that's the one thing that she always wanted. And that's my mum's one dream, that he would come back. I don't know how my mum's dealing with it as well as she is. I'm not worried about her at the moment. I'm worried about her when it starts.
Detectives from South Yorkshire Police began searching the farmland after a tip-off that Ben may have been killed and buried here. In spite of today's setback, they say the search goes on.
We will continue here until I am happy and confident, based on what the scientists tell me, and the other experts that are here, that we can be confident that we haven't missed any opportunity to find an answer for Ben's family.
Leanna, who's 22, wasn't even born when Ben went missing, but simply wants justice for the brother she never met.
My one wish and my one dream would be to find Ben for my mum. I felt in a way that I owe it to her. I'm her daughter and she misses her son, she wants her son. Either way, it's not going to be a good ending, is it?
Leanna Needham on the search for her brother Ben. Now, one of the most ambitious space missions in a generation has been brought to an end in the most spectacular way. For 2 years, Rosetta has been orbiting a comet that's speeding through space, sending back fascinating pictures and invaluable data. Today, European scientists on Earth deliberately smashed it into the rock to applause, hugs and a few tears as well. Ruth Liptrot has the story.
This was the moment when the 12-year Rosetta mission ended in a crash landing on Comet 67P. Mission Control in Germany were able to confirm the impact when radio contact with the spacecraft suddenly stopped.
Farewell, Rosetta. You've done the job. That was space science at its best.
And this was the reaction in the UK at the National Space Centre. But why did they decide to end the mission now? Well, the comet Rosetta has been tracking is now so far from the sun that the craft wouldn't have been able to generate enough solar power to keep it working.
Rather than that uncertainty of an end of a mission and maybe not having it quite planned, they said, let's go out with a bang. Let's get the most science as possible and fly as close to the comet as possible, fly towards the comet and land on it. Turn the mission off then, but in the meantime, get this amazing data.
And that's exactly what it did, taking high-resolution photos at a rate of 3 a minute until the last possible second before she died. This is the very last image. It's a bittersweet swan song for one of the most exciting space missions ever. Launched in 2004, the aim was to study the comet 67P Churyumov-Gerasimenko so we could learn more about comets and our early solar system.
So this little model is a perfect replica of Rosetta, and just to give you an idea of the size of the real thing, the main body is about as big as 2 vans and the span from tip to tip is 32 metres.
The data it's gathered will take decades to study, and it may be the next generation of astrophysicists, seen here learning what a comet's made of, who makes sense of it.
I feel quite sad because it's getting loads of information that we don't know about space yet. So I'm quite excited for more data.
What has Rosetta been doing while she's been up in space?
She's been sending data to Earth so we can experiment on comets.
It seems fitting that although Rosetta's no longer in operation, she'll continue her journey on 67P out beyond the edges of our solar system, and her legacy will continue for years to come. Ruth Liptrot, 5 News.
A girl as young as 1 month old has been rescued from a bombed-out building in Syria. Footage from social media shows workers digging through the rubble in the northern city of Idlib. It takes them nearly 4 hours before they're finally able to reach the baby and free her. One rescuer is overcome with emotion as he hugs her in the back of an ambulance. He said he couldn't believe she survived the ordeal. The girl was then treated in hospital, but the fate of her family is not yet known. A man's admitted causing the deaths of a young actor and his aunt in a car crash in southeast London. Micaiah McDermott and Rosie Cooper died in Penge in August. Joshua Dobby pleaded not guilty to manslaughter and will appear in court next in February. And 2 Vincent van Gogh paintings that were stolen during an audacious heist on a Dutch museum 14 years ago have been discovered in southern Italy. Police say the 2 paintings were found during a raid on a house in Naples that belonged to the mafia. It is exactly 100 days since the UK went to the polls and made that historic decision to leave the European Union. And today we've been given an insight into how the economy is faring, and it is good news. New figures show that in July our services sector grew, largely thanks to people carrying on spending as they always did. But are all businesses bearing up well? Peter Lane went to the northeast of England to try to find out.
The River Tyne. On one side, Newcastle, which voted in. On the other side, Gateshead, which voted out. And 100 days later, there are 2 sides here to the Brexit business story. At Flame Heating Spares in Gateshead, things are hotting up. From last summer to this, turnover has doubled. They put it down partly to a feel-good factor. Customers voted leave, got what they wanted, and have more consumer confidence. Boss John Savage is pleasantly surprised by the post-referendum figures.
A bit apprehensive when we heard that we were leaving. It was a little bit kind of shock, I feel, you know, but particularly with me being an in-vote. So I was a little bit cautious to begin with, but as sales have shown, it was very, very positive start.
But in Newcastle, at the Tyne Bank Brewery, where they've just started work at new premises, plans to buy bottling machinery from overseas have stalled because the Brexit result saw the pound fall in value, making the purchase too expensive.
Plans we had in place are having to change, which is aspect to how we all have to react, really, isn't it? But it is frustrating that we had all our ducks in a row and now they're not quite lined up perfectly. Don't think anybody really knew what they were voting for, whether in or out, and we still don't know what Brexit looks like.
Elsewhere in the northeast, a stark warning from a business giant, Nissan, whose Sunderland car plant supports tens of thousands of jobs. It now says it can't guarantee future UK investment unless the government offers compensation for extra costs that might come with leaving the EU. The government replied that it's determined to make Britain the best place in Europe to run a business. So right now, life here doesn't look much different 100 days on from the vote. But we're still a long way off from knowing exactly how Brexit will impact companies big and small. Peter Lane, 5 News.
Still to come on the programme. Why the government is telling restaurants to give you smaller portions. And the incredible moment a heckler showed Rory McIlroy just how it's done. Fantastic story that. You can see it after the break. Welcome back, you're watching 5 News. If you're about to have your tea, this is certainly one to think about. Restaurants, pubs and cafes have been told to make their portions smaller or they'll be named and shamed. The Health Secretary, Jeremy Hunt, says families are eating out more often, so it's time the catering industry did more to help keep us healthy. He's told them to slash the sugar in their dishes or slash their servings altogether. Our health correspondent, Catherine Jones, has the details.
As a nation, we're eating out much more regularly. 3/4 of us do it at least once a week. So, in its latest bid to curb obesity, the government is demanding restaurant chains, cafes, pubs and fast food outlets start doing more to keep us healthy. Ministers want them to adopt voluntary targets to either cut the sugar and fat in their recipes or to make their portions smaller. At home, you'd probably think twice before eating 7 cookies from a packet all in one go, or 2/3 of a supermarket-bought carrot cake. And yet, these contain the same number of calories as a single cookie from the bakery chain Greggs and 1 portion of carrot cake dessert bought from a Nando's restaurant. Nando's says it does provide a range of desserts, and we didn't hear back from Greggs. The British Hospitality Association says what ministers want is a hard ask, as menus and recipes vary so much across the industry. The Wetherspoons chain already includes calories on their menus. This lunchtime, their customers were divided over who's responsible for curbing our appetites while we're eating out.
I don't think it's going to make any difference if they serve a smaller portion size or a larger portion size. It's up to you how much you eat, surely.
We are so much more sort of health conscious, and the food and the salt and the sugar that we're intaking, I think it would be a good thing, personally.
I think it's your own responsibility. You need to eat up until the point where you feel satisfied and don't force anything else. Yeah.
But if you've paid for it, the temptation is to clear your plate.
That's the point of a doggy bag or a takeaway.
Rather than stuffing it down.
Yeah.
Even though the government says it will name and shame firms that don't fall in line, health campaigners fear that won't be a big enough threat. But the catering industry does say it shares the government's ambition to tackle obesity. Catherine Jones, 5 News.
Prince Charles has joined Barack Obama and dozens of other world leaders for the funeral of former Israeli President Shimon Peres. At a service in Jerusalem, the man who was one of Israel's founding fathers was remembered for refusing to give up hope of establishing peace with the Palestinians. Simon Viger reports.
He was one of the fathers of the nation. Today, the family of Shimon Peres followed his coffin into the ceremony. The former Prime Minister and President had been one of the strongest advocates of the peace process. He is the last of that generation to die.
Even in the face of terrorist attacks, even after repeated disappointments at the negotiation table, he insisted that as human beings, Palestinians must be seen as equal in dignity to Jews and must therefore be equal in self-determination.
There was a small glimmer of hope for the peace process at the service today as the Palestinian and Israeli leaders shook hands. The mourners included princes and presidents and former presidents.
His critics often claimed he was a naive, overly optimistic dreamer. They were only wrong about the naive part. He knew exactly what he was doing in being overly optimistic. He knew exactly what he was doing with his dreams.
It was an emotional farewell on the day the last of Israel's founding fathers departed the stage. Simon Weiger, 5 News.
Now, you've no doubt heard how younger people have it harder than older generations when it comes to money. And one new study has shown just how much harder. Thanks to soaring house prices and constantly low savings rates, children born in the 1980s have half the wealth of those born in the decade before. As Dominic Reynolds reports now, that means they're storing up problems for the future.
Did your early years look like this? Sound like this? And taste like this? Or perhaps you're a little younger and it's Biker Grove, Madonna and the Twirl. Well, it turns out the difference between children of the 70s and the 80s isn't just what was on the telly then, it's what's in the bank now. By the same age, the younger generation has built up just half the wealth. Melissa was born in 1982. Max arrived last year. She's hoping to buy a flat with her boyfriend next year, but until then, her accumulated wealth doesn't amount to much.
Despite the fact that I've worked since I was 14, I've always had a job. The only time I've not worked is now that I've got a baby. I've got a master's degree, and what depresses me most is that the only reason why I'm not living back at my mum's is because I've got a boyfriend with a good, well-paid job. It actually makes me worried about who's born in the 90s and the noughties and people like my son.
No surprise that this is what's widened that wealth gap so fast. Today's report has found accelerating house prices, along with slimmer pensions and wages, have left people in their 30s struggling to put anything away. The people who crunch those numbers are warning wealth isn't about spending today, but saving for tomorrow.
If they're going to have a similar lifestyle in retirement, they're going to need to either save a lot more than they are now, or they're going to need to work longer.
So outside an estate agent's window, are children of the 80s really feeling left behind? Do you own?
Yeah, no, I rent, yeah. So I can't afford to buy one, so.
Can't think of too many others of my age that have owned property.
I think there's been a policy ever since the late 70s, ever since Thatcher really, of not building social housing, and I think we're now seeing the results of that.
Have you been able to get your hands on property at all?
Oh no, I'm an estate agent as well, so...
You're the problem!
Yes, I know.
70s children are officially the last post-war generation to be better off than their elders. 80s children, the first to be losing financial muscle by comparison. Dominic Reynolds, 5 News.
And I remember all those shows. I don't know what that tells you. Sports stars often have to put up with supporters shouting from the sidelines, claiming they could do a better job. But at golf's Ryder Cup in the US, that was exactly the case. Europe's Rory McIlroy and Henrik Stenson were practicing their putting and not doing particularly well when a spectator decided to pipe up. Cue a $100 bet. Sangeeta Kandola has more.
Admittedly, Rory McIlroy and Henrik Stenson were having a bit of an off day, repeatedly missing a practice putt back-to-back. But for one fan turned heckler, enough was enough.
I'll do it.
The "I'll do it" prompted Stenson to dare him to have a go, while Justin Rose slapped down a $100 bill to make things interesting. And interesting they got. Cue the chicken dance by the fan David Johnson, followed by some handshakes and hugs from the pros, proving they're good sports.
I haven't fully realized what just happened, but overall, that was a pretty cool experience. I'd go ahead and do that again. I'd go ahead and do that again. That was nice. Where's the money? Do you hold the money? You got the bill? You got the bill? You made $100.
So this amateur scored himself a little bit of fame and fortune. Hats off to him, say the golfers, who say they'll be carrying around a fistful of dollars till the end of the tournament. Sangeeta Kandola, 5 News.
Really great, really earned it as well, didn't he? Now, pandas aren't known for being prolific when it comes to producing cubs, so visitors to a breeding research base in the Chinese city of Chengdu have got something pretty special to go and see. No fewer than 23 of them. The cubs are aged between 1 and 4 months old, and they've made their first public appearance, although some of them are still asleep, as you can see. It's ahead of China's National Day, which is tomorrow. But that's just about it from us for now. I'll be back, though, at 6:30 with 5 News Tonight, when we'll be discussing that remarkable Rosetta mission with space expert Sarah Cruddas. And what do you make of the latest idea to solve Britain's obesity crisis, including calls for restaurants to make their portions, and especially their puddings, a bit smaller? Will it help people who need to lose weight, or is it punishing everyone? Do get in touch on our Facebook page, and we'll read out the best messages at 6:30. That's just about it for me for now. Sean Welby is here with the weather next. I'll see you, of course, at 6:30 for 5 News Tonight. Bye-bye for now.